give us a highlight of what you expect Monday to be like when you're in pass for the first time.
Oh, shoot. Why don't we talk about that Monday? We got a lot of work to do today. Yeah, well, I mean, I think everybody's looking forward to Monday. Today is really, trying to really put a lid on what we accomplished in the spring. We had some review, as far as the concepts and things like that at the end of the game. Emphasis the last 2 days, or actually last 3 days, I've been very pleased with. So I just want to wrap that up today and put a bow on it. And then, then the players will be off tomorrow, and then we'll get going. And we'll jump really right back into I would call a normal flow. Third down will be the big emphasis. Come Monday. Monday's not a full practice. We're still on a limited time frame, but it'll be good to get the pads on and get into some more realistic football.
Mike, you've been running some of those 11-on-11 periods, two different groups side by side on the field. What's kind of the process and the method between having those groups running concurrently during practice?
Well, I mean, really, my methodology goes back to 06 through 2010. I would say during the pre-CBA 2011, you were able to practice longer. You didn't have limits, so. It was a great experience for me as a first-time head coach. Had some great mentors. As far as putting together a program, and Marty Schottenheimer, Paul Hackett, Ray Rhodes, and then I think just going into your first season, you just really pay attention to the numbers. And really, it's a long answer, but really where I'm going with this is, I used to the number 3,000 was something that was always in my mind. Because you could get 1,000 reps in the off-season program. Once again, the basis is more from my years as a quarterback coach. Because you look at your opportunities, how many reps you can get, how you're going to dissect that, cut that down, and apply that through the off-season, grow that into the training camp. And then if you look at it, it's the offense and defense usually average around 1,100 plays a year. So I've always looked at the ratios of how much red zone do you work on versus how much you actually use during the season. Don't have a great year on red zone, then maybe we're going to do some more of that the next year. Rob from Peter to pay Paul. So it's just it's a game of numbers. Football is numbers. Mathematics is, I think, very important to pay attention to. I always have. Then 2011 was kind of a wash. You didn't have the off season, so. Then from 12 on, I had a standard, a goal of what I was trying to get done with the football team, and worked out pretty good in 2010. So I tried to use that as a standard of training and just adjusting with that through the changes in the CBA. So with that is, how do you get more reps? How do you utilize the sports science and play the GPS into it? So and a lot of people do it. I'm sure it was very big in college football way back when I was in college football. They call it two-spot. You have two offenses going through a defense or so forth, and trying to maximize the opportunity for the young players. So with those mock games are in two-spot. But the most important thing about that is the quality of those reps. I frankly reviewed it again today in the team meeting. Those reps count. I mean, they count. I have a goal that I'm trying to hit. We're just not out there correcting some things, going through the motions. So those reps are very important, and frankly, that's why I'm with the younger players. I'm trying to get as much time with the young players and getting them ready for the preseason game, because those young guys are going to play for us. It happens every year, and you hope they don't play till November, December. But guess what? Those are really important games. So that's the facts of the matter of how you train your team, the things you looking around the corners and trying to make sure it goes. But the two-spot gives us a chance to get the numbers up where I feel they need to be. Long answer. Sorry, little filibuster there.
Where do you feel that the offense is right now as far as picking up the offense? Do you feel that they're right where you thought they should be, or farther ahead?
Yeah, mentally, I think we're in a good place, solid place. We're not ready to take the exam yet, but we're definitely in a good place. So, and to be honest, it's about knowing what to do, when to do it. But the real challenge starts Monday. When the DBs and the perimeter players can really put their hands on each other. The line of scrimmage has to be established, whether it's the run blocking unit, the pass rush, pass protection unit, pass rush, and so forth. So that's, those were when the time clocks really get, established, and we're closer to the fire of real football.
Mike, we've asked you a lot about we've asked you about the QB school. I'm just curious about the origin of it. How did you develop your methodology of training quarterbacks and some of the drills and things along those lines?
I mean, really, the credit goes to Paul Hackett. I learned it from Paul. 89 through 92 at the University of Pittsburgh. We obviously did it in a collegiate, college setting. But when we went to Kansas City, I was able. Paul was the offensive coordinator, and I was hired as a quality control coach. And we started that year in '93, and then it was. It was a great group of guys, so, with Joe Montana, Dave Craig, Matt Blunden. So it's something I've always believed in. The CBA kind of, wiped out some of the opportunity for the, because the old days, you would start that in the middle of March, and you were able to get 4 weeks of quarterback school before the off-season program started. I think it was legal back then, but if it isn't, I think the statute of limitations, I think I'm safe. But no, it was. So that's kind of how I grew up. That's what I believe in. And and Aaron, and I think Aaron was sure, because I've seen him talk to the younger players all the time, because he's the last guy that I coached that went through it. Because 2011 is when that off-season opportunity kind of went away. So it was just a great time to really have the day to break down everything for the quarterback, because let's be honest, you go to practice every day. We're trying to squeeze in time in the beginning and between periods, and every position, the O-line, they get plenty of individual time to do their thing and go through all their drills and so forth. But once all the other positions do too, but the quarterback always has to work with the running backs. They always have to work with. So where's their time to really work on their specific details of fundamentals? So we kind of squeeze it in there in the beginning of practice, and then, kind of squeeze it in as we can as special teams.
What attracted you to Tanyan to bring him here, and what attracted you to Tanyan to bring him here, and how has he helped some of the young quarterbacks? He seems to be a security blanket for them already.
Yeah, Robert's a hell of a player. Just haven't been around him as a rookie, and just I've always watched his career. After my time with him in Green Bay, but he's. He had it right away. He's a very instinctive player. He's very, very natural in the pass game. You can see particularly how he attacks the middle reads, the post routes, the alley routes, and so much of that is about the timing, the body language, in tune with the clock of the quarterback. So, I think we're extremely fortunate to have Robert here. Bobby, I think the guys like to call him, but. He's he's a really good fit for how we want to play.
Mike, with you being the offensive play caller, how do you decide how much time in practice needs to be you with your head in the play sheet, your voice in Aaron's ear, versus maybe working with the younger quarterbacks or working with the defense or things like that?
Little bit of a moving target. I think you can understand that. I mean, I'm trying to, you got a number of things like all head coaches do, and I'm sure it was here same in the past. You're trying to watch young guys and individual drills and so forth. But in this, same breath, I have an accent, so I got to make sure they hear my voice, through the headset. I'm enjoying my accent now because I don't have to worry about it. I can just let it go. So, no, but just make sure you get the mechanics, because I'm always worried about the next game. So communication, boundary communication, those things are important. But I also have, the job of a head coach too. I'm especially early, you want to practice, you make sure the flow of it, the drills, and so just keeping an eye on all that. So it may vary a little bit practice to practice.
Mike, how would you describe the attitude of the young quarterbacks you historically with your quarterback school? I mean, they come in, they got to this level, the opportunity because they're good at what they do, and then you spend obviously judging by rookie minicamp, you just spend a lot of time meticulously sort of breaking them down. I mean, are they sort of like, what are you doing here? Or is it more of a, hey, they're open to coaching and obviously they want to stay?
Well, I think the reality of it is, we all started somewhere at some time, and you have a foundation in which you believe in. I've watched the development of quarterbacks change. you know, the external training and opportunities that quarterbacks have is definitely a lot different today than it was 30 years ago. I mean, you know, just the things they're doing with these kids in high school is pretty remarkable, frankly. The training opportunities that they have. So being in tune with that, and there's some outstanding quarterback, you know, programs out there that they're training them, you know, away from the schools, and it's become a pretty profitable business, you know. So with that, but I think just being in tune with, you know, how people are teaching, you know, the throwing profile, the footwork profile, and just being able to communicate, you know, with the quarterbacks when they get here, because you know it's just like anything in football. You know, everybody doesn't teach the exact same footwork as a pass rusher in their stance. You know, everybody doesn't teach the same footwork as a defensive back. You know, it's you know, people have, you know, a certain training they believe in. It's no different for myself and how we're doing it here, and it's you know, we're very fortunate just from a pure quarterback training standpoint, and obviously other things, to have Aaron here, because you know, going back to reps. You know, this is what, 18, 19 years as a starter. I mean, you're talking about a guy that has 20,000 live reps, you know, on top of the off-season programs and so forth. So his ability to communicate to the young guys, and I've been impressed. I mean, he made a comment to Drew yesterday in the morning meeting, and Drew went right out there and tried the footwork and the technique with his eyes. So it's you know, I'm the old. It says, hey, don't do too much, you know, but it's good to see him pushing and giving these guys an education of a lifetime.
We got time for one more.
We saw Dante Kent working off to the side yesterday. Are any of those guys on PUP close to returning next week?
Not today. Yeah, not today. We'll see how you know, tomorrow and everything goes. But yeah, I don't really have anything to report on those guys.